Hey fly anglers, welcome to another Bugs and Brews fly tying tutorial. Today I'm going to do just a kind of a spin off of last week's video, and instead of tying just the regular shop vac, I'm going to be tying a variation of that called the Thread Shop Vac. Basically just substituting out that pheasant tail for a thread of the same color to have something that's going to be a little bit more durable. And at the end of the video I'm going to talk a little bit about why I like to tie this as a just simplified thread pattern. And also I'm going to be cracking open a trail day from Troegs, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. So if that's something that interests you, stick around to the end of the video. And without further ado, let's get a hook in the vise and start tying. Alright, to start, I have a Lively Legs 135 scud hook in the vise. I have that in a size 18. And then as far as the bead goes, that is a black tungsten bead in 5/32. And my thread is going to be a rusty brown in 70 denier. Now I want the thread to look as much like an actual pheasant tail as I can, since this is the thread version of the shop vac. So I'll start my thread, and I am going to advance that thread back to about the bend of the hook here, where I'm going to tie in my tail. And that is going to be Coq de Leon in medium Pardo. Now I kind of keep these tails a little short, but I think it gives it a little bit of a bugginess at the end here. That's why I mean, I've seen them where people don't even tie in the tails, but I like to add them. So I have that tail tied in, and what I'll do now is I will adjust that to the desired length, and that looks good. Like I said, I keep a fairly short tail, and we'll tie that in the whole way back to the front. Now I like to keep that tail in until I get to about the bead. And the reason being is I think it helps with the taper. Because the thinnest part of that tail is going to be at the bottom, and it's going to be a little bit thicker as you run it down. Or as you run it up, rather. So next, I'm going to use some UTC Ultra Thread in gold. And this is an extra small, because I'm tying this on a fairly small hook. I'll capture my wire, and I uncorded my thread as I was talking there. I gave it a counterclockwise spin, and that's going to help it sit a little bit flatter, and that flatness is going to help with the sink rate. So I ran it down to the bend, and now what I'll do is I will run it down about 2/3 and back up. And then I'll run it down about 1/3 and then back up, just to give it a little bit of a taper. Now next, I'll give a quick whip finish here and use the rotary function on my vise to counter wrap this wire back up. And the reason I'm counter wrapping, it's not for durability, but this time just rather so this wire doesn't get lost in my thread wraps, so it doesn't sink down into those. Keep bumping the camera. Alrighty, we have that in there, and I will just helicopter that wire out and save that for later. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in our wing. And for the wing, I like to use ice dub. And I kind of had this saved for later, but it's just a pearl ice dub. I like this over, I mean, you can tie it with like Crystal Flash or Flashaboo, but I just think that this dubbing is a little thinner. So it's more of like a wispy wing. You can make it look a little bit more translucent. And I like that about it because a wing it's clear. It's see-through, if we're looking at this in terms of, being a mayfly imitation that's emerging. Yeah, I want this to be subtle. So next, I am going to cut off that wing. Now to kind of give it a little bit of a taper, I'm gonna make this as uneven as I can. I don't want to just pull it tight and cut. So I just kind of do something like this because I'm tying it fairly quickly, and I can just trim that as I see fit. That looks pretty good. Looks a little unruly, which is what I like. Now for the dubbing, I use a peacock dubbing. I use the Arizona synthetic peacock. You can also use like a peacock ice dub or something like that, or even actual tying in peacock curl. I like the dubbing though. I think it seems to be a little bit more durable. As good as peacock looks, I haven't used it in a couple years actually in any of my flies, just due to durability, I guess. So now I have a little bit of a dubbing noodle there. I'll start tying in that thorax. Now I did a little bit of a couple thread wraps over top of that dubbing body, and that's just going to add to a little bit of durability, and the fish do not seem to mind too much if a little bit of brown thread is showing. And we'll give that a whip finish. Cut that free, and then I'm just going to trim up my dubbing body here a little bit, just a tad, just to neaten it up. There we go. That is the Thread Shop Vac. It's a little bit quicker to tie, a little bit more durable than the regular Shop Vac, and because I tie it so small and fish it on such light tippet, that seems to be very advantageous just to crank them out. So that's the Thread Shop Vac. Now, the reason why I've actually never seen this fly tied in just like a simplified thread pattern, but whenever I saw Lance Egan's Thread Frenchie, that kind of got my gears spinning a little bit, and I love fishing a Shop Vac. I love especially fishing it as a dry dropper setup, as that dropper nymph underneath a dry fly. Small sizes, whatnot, and typically, because I'm tying it off of the bend of another hook, I have very light tippet, so I lose a lot of them. And if I'm taking that extra time to tie the pheasant tail in, sometimes it just made more sense to just try a thread pattern, and I found that it worked. I fished it last year and didn't notice a difference between the regular pheasant tail and the thread pattern. So some advantages, besides the quicker tying time of a Thread Shop Vac versus a regular Shop Vac. Number one, durability. You're not going to have the fragile pheasant tail. Even though you're counter wrapping that with a wire, it still can break and make the fly look a little bit unruly, and maybe just not look as natural as like a natural bug coming up through the water column. But also for sink rate. So, first of all, I'm fishing on that light tippet. That is going to have a smaller diameter, going to sink through the water column a little bit more. But this thread body, being kind of like a synthetic material versus the pheasant tail that has all those just tiny, little appendages that come off of it. It's going to slow the sink rate a little bit. And if I have off the back of a dry fly something that is going to sink through the water column quicker and therefore have tension from the dry to the nymph, with that line in between, if that's going to occur quicker, then my ability to detect strikes is going to increase. So that's just another advantage that I've found with the Thread Shop Vac over a traditional tie. So, if the Shop Vac's a pattern that you like fishing, then I would encourage you to try this, especially if you're using it underneath a dry fly. It just kind of, really adds to that ability to detect strikes and just makes it, more efficient pattern to tie. So with that being said, let's get into the beer that I have here. Like I said, that is a Troegs Trail Day, and that is their dry hopped Pilsner. Crack this open. And that is a good looking beer right there. So I'm gonna read the description on the can here. Troegs always provides a ton of information on their cans, which I really like. So this is a beer coming in at about 5%, which is about the max of what you're gonna see for a Pilsner beer. The malt is a German Pilsner malt, and they use this with Saaz hops, which is what you traditionally see for a Pilsner, especially like your Czech Pilsners, where this beer style had actually originated. So Troegs says, this is the beer you want in hand when your compass lands at trail's end. Starting with a backbone of German Pilsner malt, this refreshing Pils is dry hopped with mildly citrusy and earthy Saaz hops. As fermentation slows, we reintroduce fresh lager yeast, conditioning the beer and delivering crisp, clean notes of biscuit, dried spice, and a hint of citrus. And beneath all of that is a foundation of good. When you buy a Trail Day, you're helping to protect the Kittanini Ridge, a 185-mile Appalachian superhighway, which provides clean water, rich forests, and safe passage for migratory wildlife. And I know a little bit about that. I think that that's a big migratory pathway for certain birds. So it's kind of a cool thing there, but there we go. Definitely get the citrusy smell that they were saying at with the Saaz hops. It's not as it's definitely got a more of a citrusiness than like the biscuity breadiness compared to most Pilsners. I'm assuming that's because of the dry hop process, after fermentation stops, where they reintroduce some of those hops to give it that little bit of extra oomph. But as always with Troegs, just a great beer. I've actually had this one before. It's one of my favorite Troegs beers. I love lagers, of all kinds, including Pilsners. And this one's no exception. So if there's Troegs available in your area, I'd encourage you to try it. That being said, I am going to crank out a couple of more Thread Shop Vacs and finish off this beer. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on the next video. Cheers.